We met way back in October and thought that we would have this conversation today. And I really appreciate you making the time to come here and talk about the importance of philanthropy.
My pleasure.
It's been really instrumental to your life, I know, from probably the time you were a young woman.
As far back as I can remember.
Yep.
I don't think my...
There we go. There we go. Adam's got it.
As far back as I can remember, so my parents were both very philanthropic, but very quiet. My dad was famous for bringing home a lot of animals and people that seemed they had no place to go. The animals my mother would let out the next day in the morning, but the people stayed. So, yeah, I grew up with a lot of it, and the foundation really wasn't formed until very, very shortly before my dad passed. And it was a matter of all that time since, so it's been 17 years, trying to formulate what works and how we change it for every generation and everything that we're trying to do.
Right, right. Now, I will mention, too, that a number of you have sent in some questions, so we have them worked into our conversation today, those that you sent in. And I think Adam's going to tweak your mic there, Kris.
I hope your questions don't involve math.
Let's hear a round of applause for Adam. Woo! Mr. Tech Guy.
Okay, better?
There we
Yeah?
go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
All right.
That's good. So let's just talk a little bit more about your parents, Kris, and their love for UND and these communities and how it started. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Well, my dad had a love for UND. My mother had a love for my dad. That's how that worked. You know, both local, and my mother's family are farmers, still are. My dad's family sold the farming equipment. And so, you know, my dad, as I say, through a very filtered daughter's eye, my dad still is the smartest person I ever knew. And, but he didn't give any thoughts to going to college because there was no money. So that just wasn't in the cards for him. And he, you know, he did a lot of manual labor. That's what you did. And then he learned about a scholarship, that he could actually go to school on a scholarship. He had never heard the word. And that's how that changed the direction of their life, the direction of my life, the direction of my kids' lives, is that he learned that he could do that. He could access it. And I think for my mother, she viewed my dad the same as I did, and that this very capable guy who was being limited by what he had access to. And so that translates now to how do we make it accessible to people who are checking all the right boxes, doing all the right things, but just don't have any resources to go, and I consider it changing your family tree. How do you go forward and not just do what's expected or what you think your limitation is? You can do more than that.
Absolutely. Would you tell the story about how your father found out about that scholarship? I love this story.
So he was spending his summer loading boxcars on the railroad. And apparently, the professors mustn't have been paid very much, because so were some of them. And so in the course of chatting, one of the professors says, "You're a smart guy. Why are you here?" "Well, what else am I going to do?" I said, "Well, why don't you go to college?" "That's not possible." "Get a scholarship." "What's that?" "You can go." And it realized, yes, he played a sport. He played hockey. Yes, he can do that. And so that is the world opening for him with scholarship. Oh, I understand now. Okay.
So it's fair. I'm a rather linear person, so I think back of, we think of professors that change our lives in many different ways. We think of it in the classroom, but this professor who was out there recognized the skills, the talents,
Yeah.
the hard work, the work ethic of this young man at that time, and saw something in him. And you connect that out to what that person saying, I believe in you, which I think scholarships do. Scholarships say, I believe in you.
I believe in you. I don't know you. I don't have to know you. I know what I see.
Yes.
I know what I think your ability is. And not that his family didn't believe in him. They just had a scope of limitation. This is what we do. We don't do more than that. We do this. And it took somebody who had a different lens to take a look and say, well, you can do that. I can? Mm-hmm. Yes, you can. You can go this way. You can do something else.
How that one conversation not only changed your father's lives, your family's life,
Absolutely.
but hundreds of thousands of lives who have been impacted now.
So the beauty of philanthropy is the trickle down. Mm-hmm. It's not just the people who maybe we scholarship or any of that. It's how does it change how they move forward in life and all the people they interact with and the people that they have the ability to shape. It is so much more of a ripple mm-hmm. than just writing a check. Mm-hmm. If we want to do it thoughtfully, if you're doing something thoughtfully, it's how do we do it and make any changes at all.
Absolutely. So when you think about that, think back, Kris, and do you remember what your first philanthropic gift was, and why did you make that gift?
Mine would have been, we had a cancer center in Nevada at the time, so Nevada Cancer. And, we have a long, rich family history of cancer. And so it was important as a donor, and then later I became a patient, but important to invest in something that was really lacking. Mm-hmm. Now, in complete transparency, we ended up investing about $33 million in that, and the center went under. That doesn't mean that I think it was a loss. It was actually a lesson in how we do things better and maybe how we vet things a little differently. And I also know that during that course of time, how many patients were there and how many people were helped, that's the difference anyway. So it didn't dissuade me from looking at that again or looking at it. It just maybe wasn't the right model going forward.
Right. Many times people think it's easy to make a gift, right? This is an example of it's not as easy as you may think. So you must have a strategic plan or a plan, and you probably learned something from that gift too. Talk to us about how your foundation develops that plan. Maybe what was something you learned from that situation that changed your philanthropic plan for the foundation.
Well, I'm really the luckiest person that I can make this plan up as I go along. I can change things that were a mistake. I can do things better. Everything is a process of learning, whether it was Nevada Cancer Center, whether it's been the people that we've scholarshiped. It's all a matter of learning how we do it. I don't know that we've had, our strategic plan has been more along the lines of wanting to make systemic changes. It's easy to write a check and leave. It is not easy to partner, which is what we really think of when we give gifts, is partnering. So we will do this, and then it will help you, and this is how the synergy works. Mm-hmm. It has been difficult in the philanthropic arena to have agencies buy into full partnership. Mm. So that's been different. Mm-hmm. I think philanthropy has changed from my parents to my generation and then certainly to my kids. It's a different way of looking how you measure success. I personally measure it by if eventually that agency is able to stand on their own 2 feet. That we shouldn't be part of their every year budgetary. We should be part of somebody who gives you a lift. We point out things that maybe you could do better, and we allow you the funding to do that. And then in that way, you reach out to your other community members, and you have more of a community buy-in, and then that's a success.
You know, I think that's interesting, and I think it's what makes the Engelstad Family Foundation a great partner, because you're not just giving the money and walking away. You're saying, okay, we have this wealth of information here, not just funds, but we have information.
Lots of them would like us to leave the money and go away.
Maybe.
I don't know that they're all that welcoming sometimes, but we won't leave. So that's what happens.
I think that's great, because you're helping. I'm going to go back to what you said about the ripple effect of a scholarship, right? So you've probably all heard you throw a little pebble out into the lake, and the ripple effect of that. By you coming in, you're making that gift, but you're also saying, look at how you're doing business this way. Is this maybe a better way to do it? And expanding probably what they can accomplish.
Well, and I think agencies, it's the nature of being philanthropic, right? I think agencies, whether your clients are disabled or homeless or hungry, are used to thinking of themselves as less than. I do this work, and I do such good work, I really should expect less for myself. I should ask less from the people who work for me. You're a business. You're a business that's measured by what happens to your clients. Are they successful? Are they on their own 2 feet? Have you improved their lives at all? And to go into a life of philanthropy is not less than, it's a greater call. Because you should be compensated exactly the same as if you were in the private sector. You have the knowledge base to tell other people what you think should be happening, advise them. And I find that the humility that a lot of agencies feel they have to have, almost as if they're sorry they're having to ask you for this and we're not worthy. Yes, you are, and you do what you do really well. There aren't a lot of well-compensated people in that arena.
Right.
And that's a pity. They offer more to the community well-good than a lot of other private sector people do.
I know there are some other nonprofits in the room today who have benefited from gifts, and I think that's an important message. It's don't apologize for working for a nonprofit. Don't apologize for the work that you're doing. Don't apologize looking for gifts and partners that will help change other lives. I think that is important.
Right. And this is what, while that's what you do, you build your agency and you build your foundation, what we do is we gift. Mm-hmm. We're on the other side of that. But it's a beautiful partnership if it can be accepted and worked on. It just works so well that I never understand, at least where I'm from, a lot of agencies work in pockets and don't want to share and don't want to cross over. But your clients are all crossing over anyway. So, and we seem to be kind of at the nucleus of we are funding these variety of agencies. So let's try to do it in community and see if that works a little better.
Absolutely. You use the term we, and there's probably quite a few in the audience today that aren't sure who makes up the Engelstad Family Foundation right now. Would you tell us a little bit about
We're such a sad little group. So, our leader and my leader is my mother, Betty. She's 86 and a little person in motion that doesn't stop and always has thoughts and sends them to me frequently as to what she thinks should or shouldn't have happened and why did you do that? The same person in the room is Jeff Cooper over at Table 1. He has been our family and business CPA for 30 plus years and also a foundation board member. And he's the person who sort of keeps us on even keel, I think. My son, Sean, has joined us recently. He's 25 and going into a grad program now. And my daughter is graduating college, and she will be on board as well. They're very philanthropic in the way they think about things. Although my son has already told me there's a few things I do that as soon as I'm not here, he's going to do completely differently. Which is fine. I won't be here then, so that's okay. I don't care.
Well, he is 25, so he's starting to know a lot now.
So. He knows everything. Everything.
So let's stay on that family conversation a little bit, because you mentioned philanthropy today is different than when your parents started in their philanthropic journey.
Yep.
And it will be different for you than it is for your children coming behind you. So tell us a little bit about what influences your parents had on your philanthropic journey, and what are the influence you think you're going to have with your kids, if you will, as they continue on this journey?
Oh, well, as I said, I was always a surprise when I woke up who or what was in my house. So I knew that was unusual. My friends didn't seem to have that happening. Like, who is that person? No, it's Marianne. She's here for 3 months. Okay. But my parents were both, and this isn't right or wrong, but they were both of the school that you did write a check, you gave the check, and your job was done. My mother views philanthropy very much, and she has said, when I go to bed at night, I know I changed somebody's life. And she's never met anybody. She's never met any scholarship recipients. She's never met and that's successful for her, and it feels good. My measure is different. I want to see it systemic. I want to see a change. I don't want to Band-Aid it. I want to, if there's something that's wrong in the machinery, I want to change part of that and see if it doesn't flow a little better. My kids are young enough to be full of passion and not know any pitfalls yet. So they see things through a very different lens as well. But they have grown up listening to us at the table and discussing, what do you think of this group, and what do you think of that person, and how do you think, and how does that look at the end? And while I thought I had that mom voice and they were kind of listening to wah, 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 it has resonated. And I've noticed that they will bring something back to me that I said, or something that they thought was more meaningful. So I think they've picked up pieces along the way, and I think my philanthropy looks different, and theirs will look very different than mine. Mm-hmm. But they'll have the ability, again, to kind of make that up, figure it out. How does it work for their generation? And some things were more important to my parents, more pet projects, maybe to me, and again to them. It will look entirely different, as it should. No. It shouldn't be in a state of never being able to change. It should be in some state of flux that you can move along with the people that you are servicing, that you're helping. So hopefully that never is too stagnant.
Right. So one of the things when we look at different ages of donors, and now looking at millennial donors like your children, we hear and see that they tend to be a more hands-on donor, wanting to be involved more. Are you seeing that, and how do you think that's going to change philanthropy, not just for your foundation, but in general?
I hope it doesn't change. I really hope that we don't operate in silos, that we are all very much part of each other's lives, and one way or another, something that happens here, again, ripple, affects somebody else. And if for me to have any meaning and any depth, I want to have my hands in there, and I want to hear a student's story. I want to hear where they came from. Most of the students we scholarship are first gen and ESL, and talk about changing a family tree. So I don't want to ever cut that out, because if I cut that out, it just becomes numbers on paper. Right. And then it really is a balance sheet that just doesn't, it's not as meaningful. I hope that the next generation is even more so. I hope they want to dig in, and I think it will be more rewarding for them to do that. I would hope it doesn't go back the other way, but I think that, my kids are 25 and 22. They consider themselves very much of a citizen of the world, of the country, of everybody. They're not isolated. So, yeah, any of you millennials, please go forward and do better. Do way better than we do.
Absolutely. So let's go down that path of the scholarship piece, because education is very important to you and to the foundation, and I've heard some of the stories of the work you've done in Las Vegas. So tell us about why do you support students through scholarships, and then tell the audience a little bit more about what some of your expectations are of those young students, and what your expectations of them are.
Well, I'm sure you realized we like scholarships because of my dad and his experience, and that was the opening for that. We sponsor students here, we sponsor high school students in Las Vegas. We have sponsored 100 plus undergrads at the university, and now we've got 40 med students at the university. When I'm looking at the debt numbers, it's not that there shouldn't be some skin in the game, but to cripple somebody so they may not even want to go into that profession is pretty tough, especially when you're dealing with the first-gen kids that we do. The favorite thing that I do every year is for the undergrads at UNLV. I go and I meet them at the beginning of the year, I see them at the end of the year, and I've gotten to know these. We've had that for 10 years. I've gotten to know these stories. And I walk away every single time thinking that if my situation was your situation, you are so much better than I am, because I wouldn't have the wherewithal to make it out of it. That every time I think I've heard enough, there's something else. We had a boy this year who, Mexican parents, but born in the United States, parents decided around 5 they just didn't want him anymore. Sent him back across the border and put him in an orphanage in Mexico. He lived there from 5 to 18 and just decided this was not going to be the way it worked. And he spent his time researching where he could go to college, how he wouldn't have to pay, how he could make his way through, and had the wherewithal, because he had been born in the United States, found his way back to Las Vegas, found our program, and he is now an engineering major.
Wow.
That is a family tree changer.
Wow.
He very well could have just stayed in Mexico, and that was how he was going to live his life, and that's what he thought his value was, and that's where his own parents sent him. If I was that boy, I don't think I would have had that.
Right.
I don't think I would have had that ability to pull myself out like that. And that is not unusual in the stories I hear. So I really do marvel at, us funding you is such a tiny little step of cracking a door. You walking through it and believing you can walk through it and doing that work is astounding. And so I do hope at the end of it that each one of them take away some pride on how hard I did this. I did this. Somebody thought I could do it, but I did that. And he's just one of many, many, many stories.
Yes. Now, you also, if I'm remembering correctly, ask your scholarship students to do some community work and giving back. So talk a little bit about that.
So for a 4-year scholarship, we ask that you give 100 hours of your time. And it's in one of the agencies that we already partner with. So they have a choice of maybe 25 or so. And I would be very surprised if in that starting group of 18-year-olds that any of them want to do any of it. They take it, fine. This is what I have to do, great. Oh, I love it. But turns out at the end of the day, we've had probably a third of them stay with these agencies that have found some purpose that they didn't realize they had. And so it takes a lot of coordination from matching students into programs and where is it a good fit and how will they do that. And we do ask that students aren't running and getting your coffee and just answering the phones. We would like them to be in something that is meaningful. And they've, been community gardening, and they've been doing all kinds of other things that I haven't had many at the end of it say, that didn't say thank you for making me do that. But also the purpose is we don't want to educate them and have them leave. It's a pervasive problem that Las Vegas has. You get somebody to a certain point, and then they move somewhere else. They take that knowledge and that skill set with them. If they have some more community buy-in, they have been more apt to stay in the community and to make that their home, which at the end of the day for us is really what we'd like to see happen.
Absolutely. And you even have that expectation on those students who are in med school, right? That it's maybe not as many hours, but there is an expectation of giving
Well, I
back.
had this discussion with the dean. I said, gosh, they're in med school, and maybe it should be 50. Or she said, nope, they're doing 100.
Ah,
I said, okay.
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
not my call. And so they're doing 100.
That's
And,
amazing.
somehow in their busy lives and their busy days, they have found time to do it. And also, I think, fine-tunes someone in med school if they hadn't thought about working in the disabled community.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe now they will. If you haven't thought about dealing with, certain populations, maybe now you will. And so there's no downside to it, other than, the ones who have to go out and put in the hours. But at the end of it, it's a win for everybody, for them, for us, for their employers, for every single person involved along the line.
Absolutely. So again, we'll go back to we hadn't planned on this, but that ripple effect, that,
Yep.
The pebble of the gift, the scholarship, the expectation of giving back to the community, what you have for the expectations of your partners in the community. And even when I think of those med school students, it's going to make them that much better of a caregiver and a physician, and how that will continue in carrying forward.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned about the clinician. I assume
Yeah.
everybody's in med school because they're smart.
Right.
I hope. But I care about how human you are. Do you care about your community at all?
Right.
Are you really practicing listening to people who are telling you what their lives are and what's happening? And sometimes when you are the smartest person in the room, it's hard to listen.
Mm-hmm.
So this almost is enforcement of that.
It is. It is. And I think that's a great point, too, that philanthropy is about listening. Mm-hmm. It's not just about giving and going. It's about listening and caring and really being a part of that gift. It's not just the money and walking away. So when change gears a little bit, here at UND with our students, we often encourage our students to find mentors. Who is it that's going to be a role model for them? Who do you want to aspire to be? I'm wondering if you had a philanthropic mentor. I mean, early on, you and I had talked about for a foundation your size, being a woman was unique, really. And
I'm like a dinosaur.
yes.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that, and who's your mentor been? How has it been being a female in this industry, and how have you found your way?
Really, really searching and digging hard. My dad passes away, and he has a loose structure of how he thinks this thing will look. And, we are the recipients of his hard work and his funding. But in the 17 years since, we, and I speak of the three of us, have been responsible for growing that funding and how we want it to look. So when I got thrown into this, really, I didn't know anybody else who did that.
Right.
And did it in perpetuity. It wasn't a spend down. And I certainly didn't know any women. I had heard of one woman along the way in Las Vegas, and she had worked for a gentleman, and he hadn't had any children, and he left her in charge of everything. And she is now probably 80. And I called her up and just cold called her and said, can I come and talk to you? And she said, okay, and she had no idea who I was and no idea why I was coming to talk to her. And I walked in her office, and the first thing she said to me was, I don't have any money to give you. And I said, that's okay, I don't want any. And she said, why are you here? I said, I want to know. I want to know what has worked for you, what hasn't worked for you. What do you suggest I do? I'm really navigating my way through this and not super sure where's the right direction to go. And she was very kind with her time. And, she and I had developed a relationship. And she always says to me, you're the only person who ever called and asked me if you could talk to me or asked me what I thought, that I wasn't somebody's secretary. I wasn't the person who just got the money. And I'm telling you, she could read a contract like no attorney I've ever known. So she was self-taught and figured it out, and she is the person that she was dismissed an awful lot in meetings because she was, that woman that he gave the money to. I wonder why. There was a lot of that. And she just kept moving and kept moving it along. And so that has been somebody that I've really treasured in my life.
Are you mentoring anyone right now yourself?
Nobody wants to ask.
Okay, there you go.
And I was saying, my poor cousins are here, and I said, you could have saved the money. I just do this for free at home. No, I mean, I am open to anybody who ever asks me questions, but I think there's very few of us in this situation. This is a really unusual club to be in. I have 2 friends in Las Vegas who find themselves in similar situations. So we, sit together quite a bit and talk, and we want nothing from each other other than a little knowledge. And so that works out beautifully. But other than that, when you go out into other communities, we really do look like unicorns. I mean, we are not the usual of who you see.
Right. I think that's an important point for all of us, and maybe especially as women, that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, I'm not sure how to do this, and how did you do it? Because I think oftentimes we feel that we should know everything, and if we ask, we're showing weakness. And I think not asking is weakness. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
I do as well, and I'm 60, so it's taken me this long to have some ownership, sadly, to not just be Ralph and Betty's daughter, Tim's wife, I'm Sean and Aaron's mom, all of which I love. But I'm more than that, and I'm more than those pieces. And while I may not have had the formal education of how do you run a philanthropic group, I had the sensibilities of knowing what made sense. And I had always worked in the gaming industry, so I had a background, but it's learning as women to trust your own instincts. And we have really good instincts, ladies.
We do.
Really good instincts. And so rather than thinking, if you feel it, it can't be right, maybe pay attention to the first thing you feel. Because I have found most times that is exactly right. And find somebody who is your peer. Talk amongst yourselves. It's the only way you're going to exchange any information.
That is so true. And that was really the purpose of when we first brought this group together 5 years ago, is that as women in particular, we don't have philanthropic role models. We don't know what it means to give something back, or if I'm giving too much, does it look like I'm bragging because I have more to give than my friend?
Am I a soft touch? Am I a soft touch, or am I a bitch? It seems that there's only 2 categories I can fall into. So I can't just be sure of myself and sure of what I'm doing. It must be one or the other. And that's something, here's the changing face of philanthropy, is up until now, and myself included, women had control of the money because you inherited it, your husband died, but we've been responsible for growing it and making something out of it. More and more, private wealth is going to be held by women. It's just the way it is. And I think women are very good at, we've been taught to play well with others. We've been taught, and we're pretty good at collaborating if we're given the opportunity to collaborate. But more and more, the faces you're going to see, I think, sitting around a table and making the decisions are going to be women. So it's important for me to foster other women
Absolutely.
And this is what you're going to see sitting around a table.
Absolutely. So my colleague Brooke is telling me I can ask one more question.
Okay.
And our time is up already.
Where is this mysterious Brooke? Where is she?
She's hiding behind the pole.
Oh,
So let's end, Kris, with tell us about what has been your best or your most memorable giving experience.
Other than scholarships, I'll take that out because they're always the best. I didn't meet the woman. It was at a women's shelter, and went through the shelter. And the shelter in Las Vegas it's like big barracks. It's tough. It's loud. It's nothing homey about it. It's a bunch of bunk beds and lined up, and you have to be out for the day. And it's in a horrible part of town, and it's rough. And I went through during the daytime, and when women leave, typically they have a big hefty bag with their things, and they're out, and that's how they leave. So a lot of hefty bags sitting around, and they had a library there, so you could check out books and read in your spare time. And I saw one woman's cot, her bed, and she had brought a bedspread, she had a pillow, she had a stuffed animal, and it was perfectly made. She had slippers under the bed, and she had a cookbook she had gotten from the library, and it was marked, and she had it on the bed waiting. And it was one of those things, again, I thought, if your entire life is reduced to this twin bed, this is what my life is now. But I will take pride in this part of my life, and I'm going to make it beautiful, and this is my home, and I'm going to make my bed like I did at home, and I'm going to, how she had the wherewithal to grab anything she did and bring it with her. But we ended up giving to that shelter, and really it was based completely for me on that one twin bed.
Wow, that's impactful. It's a beautiful story. Well, thank you for being such an inspiration to us, for being here today, for being a role model, someone we can all look to of how we can do more, how we can do better. How do we continue the conversation? Promise us that when you walk out of here today, you continue the conversation of how we work together for philanthropy. So thank you, Kris. And we've got a little gift for you, too.
Oh, thank you. Am I opening?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.